All right, Michael, let's talk about Japan. A couple of very, on paper, very, very impressive wins. Two German coaches. One, he got sacked. Moriyasu almost got the second one sacked as well. Yeah, big wins. What was your take generally on these games? Germany in Germany, and as we said, Turkey in Belgium.
Generally very good. Generally very, very good, actually. I mean, especially when you think from the perspective of the win against Germany was the first time that Japan had beaten a European nation at their home on home soil since November of 2013, so almost a decade since they'd last done that. And obviously, over the last 10 years, outside of World Cups, Asian nations in general haven't really had the opportunity to play against European teams because of all the issues with nations leagues and all the rest of it. Obviously, Japan like to play a lot of their friendly matches at home for commercial reasons and what have you. But I thought the German performance was very professional. It was very solid. It was clinical. I thought they played some really good football at times. I thought Wataru Endo was exceptional. I thought Tomiyasu was exceptional. I thought they played really well. I thought they managed the game largely very well against the German team. That, I mean, let's not pretend the Germans are not at their peak at the moment. And obviously with Hansi Flick getting fired, that's not just my opinion that Germany are not playing well at the moment. Obviously the Deutsche Fußballbund think similarly, and they've made that change. But I still think, look, I thought they played very well. Um, Against Turkey, obviously a very different game against a very different team. Japan did what Japan do when they're playing against nations that Hajime Moriyasu thinks he can dominate. He'll put out a slightly weaker, or well, maybe not weaker team, but certainly his second string team, and they will play with a bit more freedom and um, a bit more sort of attacking verve. And they showed that certainly in the first 30 minutes against Turkey, where they were very good, 3-0 or what, 35, 36 minutes. The question that I was left asking after watching both games is, why is Takefusa Kubo not starting in what would be considered the stronger 11 for Japan? Every time I watch him, and particularly the game against Turkey, where I thought he was the best player on the pitch, he's been in great form for Real Sociedad. And I think when you compare him to the player who is sort of most comparable in terms of position within what would be considered the stronger team with Daichi Kamada, I think Kubo just brings so much more to the team from an attacking perspective. And I've been giving this a lot of thought over the last sort of few nights, ever since watching the game on Monday or Tuesday, whichever night it was. Kubo is increasingly, for me, becoming a player who reminds me a lot of Hidetoshi Nakata, with on the ball, the way he runs at defenses, his ability to play that very telling slide rule pass in to break through the lines and give his attacking players options and opportunities. And I just don't see now why he's not starting for the national team every game. I think he's really blossoming into the player that um, I think we had all hoped he would become. I think he's getting there, and I think now is the time to get him starting in the starting 11.
I think it's a question we've all got too, Michael. I want to come to you on Japan's performances, Scott, because we know you've been highly critical of Moriyasu over his tenure, with good reason a lot of the time as well. What have you made of not just these last two performances, but the couple of matches before that as well? They've scored 18 goals in 4 games, which is most unlike Moriyasu's Japan's teams. What have you made of their performances since the World Cup, and has he taken this team forward, do you think?
I think yes and no. And yeah, I mean, if you look on the surface, the results are fantastic. I mean, you're beating Germany in Germany, and you're playing, a strong nation in Turkey. I'm going to ask Gabe in a minute about some of these other nations within Asia that have tended to play each other or play kind of lesser opposition. And, with an expanded World Cup, I don't know if that's necessarily the way that the teams want to be approaching things. So credit to Japan, going to difficult environments, testing themselves against difficult teams. But once again, as we've seen, some other teams have, I don't know why, but recently under Graham Arnold, Australia have tended to only play one game in these windows, but Japan pretty much play the two every time. And in recent times, they tend to play things the same way. The stronger opposition, they play with what you can say now is an established A team. And the so-called weaker opposition, they play with pretty much a clearly established B team as well. You kind of delineate the players within that pretty easily. I agree with Michael on Kubo, but I think it's not just him as well. I think there's other players within the B team. I'd love to see Ritsudowan starting regularly. You guys know I'm not a massive fan of the head down blinkered speedster that is Junior Ito on the right, who still really technically a very poor footballer for me and nowhere in the same realm as Doan. So this confuses me. The Kubo thing confuses me. Tanaka confuses me. The issues at left back confuse me, where they've got a converted central defender as the only left back in the squad. There's a great guy playing in J2 here, a guy called Rayon Yamahara, young. I think should be the future of the national team for the next 10 years, but we know Moriyasu doesn't go to J2 games, doesn't consider players. He's been open about this from J2 as well. So I think he's hamstringing himself a little bit in terms of the selections. But the thing that bothers me is, if we look at the results, the performance was completely different, and the way that the results came about, the orchestration of them, were completely different as well. Because in the Germany game, they had 30% possession, basically sitting back. And two of the goals came in stoppage time as well. So it's a little bit, but they were happy to cede space. They were happy to play as they played mostly at the World Cup, looking to exploit teams on the counter, low possession rates, low XG rates. They got away with it in the World Cup, and they did well in getting away with it against Germany. But then why, if this is the way you're going to play, then come and play the way they played against Turkey, where the so-called inferior players can go out with license to attack. I don't see the identity in the team, which I've never liked the old identity, but now he's got these two kind of conflicting identities. But we know what he's going to do when he gets into competitive environments, that he's going to revert back to what he had. But he's shown that with in theory lesser players, that he's given them a license to play, and they can come out and they can play that way. Of course they can, and we all know that. So why then does he feel it necessary against the so-called bigger teams to go back and play conservatively? I just don't get the flipping and flopping in these things. And the point that I've always come back to with Moriyasu is it reflective of Japanese football and the way that things have been built for this 100-year plan, and the way that I think fans here like to see the game played as well. It's not the kind of way that they played against Germany. It's not the kind of way that they played in the World Cup. But we're at this point now, and I think the women's World Cup, the way that they played most of those games as well. You look at they beaten Spain 4-0, but they had 3 chances and they had 20% possession, and they scored on every shot they had. So is this the way that Japanese football overall is becoming? I don't know. Maybe it is, and I don't think it's utilizing the best characteristics of Japanese football. And I'm convinced that if they had a different coach in charge, they would do what Moriyasu tends to do against these these lesser nations in a more regular manner. And I think Japan can win the World Cup, because you can win the World Cup with the quality that you've got, and with the identity that you should be playing with. The way you play in Qatar, the way you play against Germany, you'll get these results, from time to time. But it's not an identity that's going to win you the World Cup. So, the guy's getting plaudits, the guy's getting big name coaches sacked. But I just don't. And again, we're not arguing about is I don't know, Pakistan or something, who never has a chance to do anything. We're talking about the top team in Asia testing themselves against very good opponents. And, on the surface, things are great. I understand that and I recognize that. But the goal for Japan isn't to qualify for the World Cup. It shouldn't be to get out of the group. It should now, at this point in the development, in this point of the cycle, the technical qualities, the clubs, and the level that players are playing at domestically, the goal has to be to win the World Cup, and it has to be the only goal. And I don't think that Moriyasu is the guy to do it for them. Plain and simple. I think, again, schizophrenic performances from one game to the other I don't see it. You have an identity, you have a consistent identity when you're good enough, and okay, he's shown he's good enough in one way to go against Germany. Why can't he show that he's good enough to really go on the front foot, play the high line, push Germany back instead of reacting to what they're doing? I don't agree with the philosophy. I don't agree with the approach, and I don't think he's the right guy to win the World Cup for Japan, which has to be the goal for Japan.
I think to slightly counter that, I mean, I don't disagree necessarily with anything that you've said. What I like about where he has them at the moment is that you're right. They're very much, as they showed at the World Cup. We didn't need to watch the game against Germany the other night to know that they're capable of playing that game of sitting deep, men behind the ball, frustrating, countering, winning, holding on to a lead and taking a win. And then also are now also able to go out, dictate, dominate a game and play a much more proactive game. What I like about it is he's shown that he has teams that are capable of playing more than one way. He's put it out there that there is more than one way to skin a cat, and I have a squad of players who are capable of doing that.
Sure, that means you don't have a mentality, though.
But
that's fine. It's my approach. That's my approach, but I don't like that. I understand some of the word, but Michael, these discussions are not going on in Brazil. They're not going on in Spain, right? They don't have these kind of discussions where there's no situation. There's no situation where you should sit back and say that we concede space, we concede territory, and we're happy for you to have it, and we'll take what we can. The big footballing nations don't talk like this. So why should, and my point in all of this, coming back to it, is we should be now viewing Japan in the same way that we're viewing these nations as a nation that's a contender to win the World Cup. And so that you can leave the underdog mentality, the plucky
let's get them to the quarterfinals first. Let's get them beyond the round of 16 because they still can't do that, and we've seen that. As frustrating as it was, we saw that in November, December, and how frustrating that was. We've seen when they get given the opportunity to play against a country like Costa Rica, where they can take the advantage, they didn't. And I've very rarely walked out of a World Cup match involving an Asian team more angry and disappointed and frustrated by a performance than I ever was with that. That was just, and still to this day, there was an opportunity for Moriyasu to do what he did against Turkey, for example, put that team out that can play that kind of football and go and dictate and dominate and win the game and have it won in 20 or 25 minutes, which they could have done against Costa Rica because they had the players to do it. And they end up losing it. But let's not rehash that whole debate, obviously. But I do like that he's adding in some flexibility that maybe wasn't there before. And he did do that to a degree at times during the World Cup as well, switching from a back four to a back five. Okay, maybe not necessarily. Does he have the players to do that? Playing Mitoma at left wing back is a bit of a waste. He did that against the Germans the other night as well, briefly. At the start of the second half. As you mentioned earlier, there's clearly issues. Sorry, left back, not right back. There's clearly issues on the left side, whether it's left back and playing Hiroki Ito there when clearly he's a centre half. They're a long way from being the finished article, but I think they're going in the right direction. I think they have to be more ambitious. I totally agree with you, and I think that was ultimately the idea of keeping Moriyasu on, in some respects, was to give them that continuity and build on what they had achieved in Qatar. Now, whether that happens or not is obviously another issue. But I think they're going in the right direction.